What if I told you the most recession-proof careers weren't invented in Silicon Valley, but in the 1400s? While everyone's panicking about AI stealing jobs, a small group of people are dusting off skills your great-great-grandmother would recognize. The weird part? Corporate America is actually paying premium rates for them. Here's the thing about blacksmithing. Medieval kids started their apprenticeships at 12 years old. 12. Sleeping on forge floors, learning to read fire colors before they could read actual books, and they trained for 7 straight years before anyone let them shape hot iron into anything useful. Why so long? Because a blacksmith who messed up didn't just ruin metal. He ruined the village. No smith meant no horseshoes meant no plowing meant no food. Simple as that. Every single thing in medieval life depended on someone who could bend iron to their will. Farmers, builders, soldiers, all useless without the guy covered in soot. That's why smiths got paid like doctors, respected like priests, sometimes feared like both. Now here's where it gets interesting for you. A medieval smith hammered out roughly 200 nails per day, back-breaking, ear-destroying work. Modern hobbyist smiths? They're selling handcrafted knives on Etsy for $50,000 to $80,000 a year. Same ancient skills, better hearing protection, much better retirement plan. The startup cost runs between $2,000 and $5,000. A propane forge, an anvil, your garage, that's it. I've seen guys start with less equipment than what's sitting unused in most suburban basements. And the demand. Custom knife makers with decent YouTube followings have waiting lists stretching 18 months. 18 months. People will literally wait a year and a half for something made by hand when they could order a factory knife tomorrow. Makes sense, right? In a world drowning in mass-produced junk, handmade anything feels rare, valuable, real. The medieval smiths burned out their hearing from constant hammer strikes. Most were half-deaf by 40. But you, ear protection exists now. You could genuinely enjoy this craft into your 80s. Same fire, same hammer, same satisfaction of making something permanent. But blacksmithing isn't the only medieval trade making a quiet comeback. There's something even older, and honestly, it requires way less sweat. Here's the thing about medieval beekeepers. They didn't just keep bees. They held one of the most protected jobs in all of Europe. Why? Because honey was it. The only sweetener anyone had. No sugarcane, no corn syrup, just honey. And beeswax? Churches burned through it like we burn through electricity. A single cathedral could use 20,000 pounds of the stuff every year just for candles. So naturally, monks dominated the game. They had the land, the patience, and honestly, the motivation. Monasteries needed wax like offices need coffee. It wasn't optional. But here's where it gets interesting for you. A productive hive today pumps out 30 to 60 pounds of honey annually. Farmer's market price, $12 to $20 a pound. Do the math on 4 hives. That's potentially $2,000 for what amounts to checking on your bees a few times a week. I'll be honest, when I first heard those numbers, I thought someone was exaggerating. They weren't. The medieval guys had it rough, though. They used straw baskets called skeps, and harvesting meant destroying the entire colony. Every single time. Modern Langstroth hives, you just pop out the frames, spin the honey out, and put them back. The bees barely notice. And your neighbors? They'll actually thank you. Bees work a 2-mile radius, pollinating everything. Their tomatoes will be better because of your side hustle. The legal side is almost suspiciously easy. Most states exempt small-scale honey sales from commercial licensing requirements, no health department inspections, no expensive permits, just you, your bees, and jars of liquid gold. Medieval bee masters needed special legal protections from the crown. You need a backyard and maybe $300 for starter equipment. The bees do 90% of the work. You just give them a box to live in and show up to collect rent. Speaking of medieval crafts with questionable smells, let's talk about something that literally drove workers to the edge of town. Medieval tanners were the original social outcasts, not because they lacked skill, because they stank. We're talking urine-soaked hides, animal brains, and decomposing flesh all fermenting together in wooden vats. Towns literally banished tanneries to the outskirts, downwind, far away from anyone with functioning nostrils. And yet, These smelly craftsmen earned 3 times what common laborers made. A master saddler in 1300s England lived better than most merchants. Why? Because leather lasted decades. A good saddle outlived the horse wearing it. Here's where it gets interesting. That brain tanning method medieval craftsmen used, it actually works because mammal brains contain lecithin, a natural oil that permanently softens and preserves leather. Every animal has exactly enough brain matter to tan its own hide. Nature's weird like that. Now forget the stench and the urine vats. Modern vegetable tanning uses tree bark extracts, completely safe. You can do this in your garage without your neighbors forming an angry mob. The startup costs are almost laughable. A basic leather crafting kit runs under $100. Leather supply houses sell scraps by the pound for pennies. Compare that to blacksmithing's $2,000 minimum, and you've got the cheapest medieval trade to revive. But does it pay? Modern leather crafters on Etsy report monthly revenues between $1,500 and $4,000 once established. Wallets, belts, bags, custom holsters, anything hand-stitched commands premium. Prices because people can tell the difference between machine-made and crafted with care. I tried making a simple card holder last year. Looked like a drunk beaver attacked some cowhide. But that's the point. This craft has a learning curve steep enough to keep mass producers out, yet shallow enough that dedicated hobbyists master it within months. The medieval tanners died young from chemical exposure. You get to keep your health and skip the brain soup entirely. Speaking of ancient pharmacy knowledge, the next skill involves plants that medieval monks guarded more carefully than gold. Medieval herbalists couldn't read. Didn't matter. They memorized hundreds of plant remedies by watching, smelling, and tasting their way through years of apprenticeship. One wrong identification? Dead patient. Maybe dead herbalist too, once the family found out. Monks took this knowledge and organized it. The plan of St. Gall from 820 AD shows 16 dedicated medicinal plant beds inside monastery walls. These weren't decorative gardens. They were pharmacies, each herb mapped to specific ailments, grown in quantities large enough to treat entire communities. And here's what kills me. They were actually right about most of it. Take elderberry. Medieval healers swore it fought winter sickness. Modern science, the U.S. elderberry supplement market now exceeds $200 million annually. Turns out grandmother wasn't guessing. Willow bark for pain? They nailed that too. Contains salicin. Scientists eventually synthesized it into aspirin. Medieval herbalists beat pharmaceutical companies by about 6 centuries. But why does this matter for your wallet? Because the FDA allows herbal product sales as long as you don't claim to cure specific diseases. That legal distinction lets small producers thrive without medical licensing. You can sell elderberry immune support syrup. You cannot sell elderberry flu cure. Same bottle, different words, completely different legal consequences. Modern herbalists at farmers markets charge $8 to $25 per item for dried herb blends, tinctures, and salves. Profit margins hit around 70% when you grow your own ingredients. My neighbor started with 5 herbs in raised beds. 3 years later, she's pulling in more from weekend markets than her Tuesday through Friday desk job. The startup cost, seeds, some mason jars, maybe a dehydrator, we're talking under $200 to begin. Growing plants won't make you rich overnight, but it might make you independent. And unlike your laptop, herbs don't need software updates or monthly subscriptions. Speaking of turning simple ingredients into serious money, there's another medieval skill that literally built empires. Barrel by barrel. Coopers were the unsung heroes of medieval logistics. Without them, no armies marched, no ships sailed, no wine aged. Here's why. A cooper made barrels, and barrels held everything. Water for troops, gunpowder for cannons, fish for Fridays, wine for literally everyone because medieval people drank wine like we drink coffee. The wild part? These barrels used 0 nails, 0 glue, just curved wooden staves held together by metal hoops and pure physics. The pressure alone keeps everything watertight. This design worked so perfectly that we still use it today. 800 years later, not a single improvement needed. A journeyman cooper in 14th century London earned guild wages, real money, comparable to what a skilled plumber or electrician makes now, and their work outlasted them by generations. A properly made barrel, expected to last a century. But let's talk about the modern opportunity. Bourbon legally requires new charred oak barrels, every single batch. That's 1.2 million fresh barrels needed yearly just for American whiskey. Craft distilleries pay $300 to $600 per handmade barrel. Wineries want them too. So do furniture makers who transform old barrels into tables and chairs. I actually visited a cooperage last year. Watching someone shape staves with hand tools felt like witnessing magic. Fire, water, steam, and muscle memory passed down through centuries. General woodworking follows the same pattern. Medieval craftsmen worked with green wood. Easier to carve, stronger joints once dried. Modern shops use kiln-dried lumber because it's convenient, not because it's better. The average custom furniture maker earns $45,000 to $70,000 annually. High-end craftsmen building heirloom pieces? 6 figures. Some have waiting lists measured in years. Makes sense when you think about it. IKEA furniture falls apart. Handcrafted pieces become family treasures. Now, woodworking requires skill and patience. But there's another medieval trade that needs almost no training to start. Just flour, water, salt, and a willingness to wake up earlier than any sane person should. Medieval bakers had alarm clocks. They were called roosters don't care about your sleep schedule. These guys rolled out of bed at 2 in the morning. Not because they wanted to, because wood-fired ovens take 4 hours to reach proper temperature. You couldn't just twist a dial and wait 10 minutes. And here's where it gets interesting. They baked in sequence. Hottest bread first when the oven peaked, then pastries and lighter goods as the heat slowly dropped. Waste nothing. Use everything. The steaks? Brutal. Cheat a customer on weight, and you might lose a hand. Or get dragged through town on a sled while people threw rotten vegetables at you. That's why bakers started adding a 13th loaf to every dozen. Better to give extra than face medieval cancel culture. A village baker in 1200s England pumped out 200 to 300 loaves daily. Enough to own property. Hire apprentices. Live comfortably. Bread wasn't just food, it was the economy you could eat. But the real magic? Sourdough. Starters. These living cultures can survive indefinitely. Some bakeries today use starters descended from batches over a century old. The fermentation chemistry hasn't changed one bit since monks first figured it out. Wild yeast doesn't care what year it is. Now here's what changes everything for modern bakers. Cottage food laws in 48 states let you sell bread directly from your home kitchen. No commercial space required. Annual limits range from $25,000 to completely unlimited, depending on where you live. I looked into this myself last year. The math surprised me. Artisan sourdough at farmers markets goes for $6 to $12 per loaf. Dedicated home bakers clear $500 to $1,500 weekly working just 3 market days. That's real money for something humans have done for millennia. Your great-great-grandmother's bread skills suddenly have serious earning potential. But bread only stays fresh so long. Which brings us to something medieval people mastered that lasts for years. Medieval weavers weren't sitting around making friendship bracelets. These were highly trained professionals who spent up to 7 years mastering their craft before anyone would buy their cloth. In Flemish cities like Bruges and Ghent, master weavers earned salaries comparable to university professors. Not bad for sitting at a loom all day. Here's what made weaving so valuable. England's entire medieval economy basically ran on thread. By the 1300s, wool and woven cloth accounted for 90% of all English exports. 90%. That's like if the entire modern American economy depended on one industry. Weavers weren't craftspeople. They were the economic engine. Now, a skilled hand weaver produces roughly 1 yard of fabric per hour. Sounds painfully slow, right? Well, here's where it gets interesting. Hand-woven cloth today sells for $50 to $200 per yard. Do that math. Even at the low end, you're looking at decent hourly rates for work you can do while listening to podcasts in your pajamas. And people tried to speed this up. The flying shuttle came along in 1733, and weavers actually rioted against it. Smashed machines, burned workshops. They were terrified of unemployment. Sound familiar? We've been anxious about technology stealing jobs for 300 years. Nothing new under the sun. Modern fiber artists selling hand-woven scarves, blankets, and table linens report annual incomes between $20,000 and $60,000. All from home, no commute, no fluorescent lighting, no passive-aggressive emails from corporate. But here's the part nobody talks about. Unlike factory textile work, which basically destroyed people mentally and physically, Handweaving actually activates problem-solving parts of your brain. Studies show it reduces stress and anxiety. You're literally getting paid to meditate with your hands. The monks knew this. Medieval monasteries included weaving as spiritual practice. Speaking of monks and patience, the next skill takes that preservation mindset even further. Because if weavers turned thread into wealth, cheesemakers turned something far more perishable into actual currency. Here's the thing about milk. It goes bad. Fast. Medieval farmers figured this out the hard way every single summer. But then someone, probably by accident, discovered something incredible. Take 10 gallons of milk that'll spoil by Tuesday, add some salt and the right bacteria, wait a few months, and you've got a pound of cheese that lasts for years. You've basically turned a ticking clock into a savings account you can eat. Monks absolutely ran with this idea. Those guys had nothing but time and patience, which is exactly what cheese needs. Munster, Maroilles, Pont-l'Evêque. All monastery inventions, all still made today using recipes that haven't changed in 800 years. When your product outlives entire kingdoms, you've done something right. And the weird part is how valuable this stuff became. A wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano made the exact same way they've done it since the 1200s. That sells for $1,000 to $2,500. Italian banks literally accept cheese wheels as collateral for loans. I'm not kidding. There are bank vaults in Italy filled with aging Parmesan. Your savings account earns 2% interest. Their cheese earns flavor. Now, you're probably not going to rival Italian cheesemakers anytime soon, but home cheesemakers at farmers markets pull in $15 to $30 per pound for Artisan varieties. The aged stuff commands top dollar because time itself becomes an ingredient. The science sounds complicated, but it's really just controlled spoilage. Salt, acid, specific bacteria. You're basically managing a tiny civilization of microbes. The tricky part isn't starting. It's getting the texture right, the flavor balanced. That takes years of practice and probably a few batches that taste like feet. Here's a legal loophole that mirrors medieval methods perfectly. Raw milk cheese aged over 60 days, legal to sell in all 50 states without pasteurization. The aging process kills harmful bacteria naturally, just like cheesemakers discovered centuries ago. But cheese isn't the only medieval drink making a serious comeback. Vikings didn't just raid and pillage, they also made one of the most forgiving alcoholic beverages in human history. Mead, honey wine, the drink of warriors and monks alike. Here's what makes mead special for beginners. Honey naturally kills bacteria. So unlike beer or wine where one wrong move spoils your entire batch, mead practically wants to succeed. It's almost difficult to mess up. The basic chemistry hasn't changed in 1,000 years. Honey, water, yeast, weight. That's it. A 5-gallon batch costs about $40 in ingredients. When it's done fermenting, you've got 25 bottles. Sell those at a farmer's market for $15 to $25 each, and suddenly your $40 investment returns $300 or more. But here's the part most people don't realize. You can legally make 200 gallons per year at home without any license. That's enough to perfect your recipes, experiment with different honeys, add fruits and spices, all before you ever file paperwork for commercial production. The industry noticed this low barrier to entry. Back in 2003, America had 60 meaderies. Today, over 500. Sales climb 15% every year as people get tired of the same wines and IPAs, and the history runs deep. The word honeymoon exists because newlyweds drank mead for a full lunar cycle after their wedding. Medieval doctors prescribed it for everything from digestion problems to low energy. Monasteries guarded their recipes like state secrets, passing them down through centuries. I tried my first batch 3 years ago. Tasted terrible. My second batch? Still not great, but by batch 5, I had something I was genuinely proud to share. That learning curve is half the fun. The weird part is how meditative the process becomes. Checking fermentation, racking to secondary vessels, bottling. It's slow work in a fast world. Mead connects you to something ancient, but connection to ancient practices means nothing without practical skills to match. Speaking of practical, let's talk about the one medieval skill that literally puts food on your table every single day. And finally, we arrive at the oldest wealth strategy in human history: animals. Medieval peasants didn't measure their worth in coins, they counted legs. A single cow represented an entire year's wages. Losing livestock to disease wasn't just bad luck, it was generational ruin. Your great-grandchildren would still feel that loss. Here's what's wild. A small flock of just 6 laying hens produces roughly 1,800 eggs per year. Pasture-raised eggs sell at farmers markets for $6 to $10 per dozen. That's $900 annually from 6 birds that basically feed themselves if you let them scratch around your yard. My neighbor started with chickens just for fun. Now she's got a waiting list, but chickens are just the entry point. Medieval farmers practiced rotational grazing to prevent pasture exhaustion. Modern regenerative agriculture has finally caught up and proven they were right all along. Turns out peasants understood soil science better than industrial farms did for a century. Want dairy without owning acres? Pygmy and Nigerian dwarf goats thrive on half-acre lots. They produce 1 to 2 quarts of milk daily, and their small size makes them legal in suburban zones where standard livestock is banned. Your HOA probably allows small pets. Just saying. The real appeal, though, unlike digital income that vanishes when servers crash or algorithms change, animals keep producing regardless of market conditions. Interest rates don't affect egg production. Stock crashes don't stop goats from making milk. Every skill in this list shares something important. They create tangible value that people genuinely need. Not another app. Not another service that exists only because we invented problems to solve. Real things, food, tools, clothes, shelter. The medieval economy wasn't primitive. It was direct. Maybe the 40-hour work week under fluorescent lights isn't the peak of human achievement after all. Maybe our ancestors figured out something we forgot. Your hands can build a life your cubicle never will.